Did you want me to jump right into my presentation? I guess I'm just going to do that. Okay, so my name is Cecilia Araneda, and I'm the director of the 10-minute experimental documentary titled The Space Shuttle Challenger. I am going to briefly show you a small little clip of the film to start with, and I'm just going to see if I can get it correct this time. This is a In 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up into tiny pieces over the Earth. Later, it would be discovered that there was no reasonable expectation for the shuttle to have successfully launched in the cold temperature of Cape Canaveral that morning.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
Months after, due north in Toronto, a baby boy would be born. And that gives a bit of a highlight of the type of work. Through found footage, the Space Shuttle Challenger entwines the Challenger disaster, Guantanamo Bay, Chile's coup d'etat, and the experience of being 16. It reflects on the impact of large events in world history and small moments of hope that survive. The film specifically entwines the stories of Omar Khadr, Leonardo Henriksen, and my own personal family history fleeing Chile's military dictatorship and finding refuge in Canada. The Space Shuttle Challenger is my most acclaimed film to date. It is predominantly a found footage work, which does set it apart in my filmography. Although I have used found footage before, I've never utilized it to the same extent as I have in this film, which is comprised mostly of found footage. The process of starting this film was not as concrete as many of my other works. It was a work that I needed to stop and start over the course of 6 years. I'm gonna just see if I can move the image here. Whoops, there we go. My initial starting point was to examine the narration of Chile's coup d'etat through film and photography. It's a large, shared, collective public archive that creates this narration. But for me, it's also a private archive in a way, as it's not only a mechanism that directly captures, as it's the only mechanism that directly captures the experience of my family at the time and how I ended up growing up in Canada in northern Manitoba. My mother was taken at gunpoint by a military unit one day while she was at work and was imprisoned in Chile's infamous killing stadium, the Estadio Nacional, for a month in October 1973. A jealous and spiteful work colleague had reported her to the military regime for planning an uprising against the new dictatorship. The overall context was so many layers of utterly unbelievable, especially factoring the context that my mother had 4 children between the ages of 3 and 8 at home. How she became to be imprisoned by Pinochet is a reminder that authoritarianism works only through the participation of everyday citizens as its workhorses. When my mother was released, She was instructed to remain in the country to make herself available for further questioning in the future. And at that point, my parents basically left on the next flight out to Mexico City, leaving me and my siblings under the care of my extended family. Canada eventually accepted my parents as refugees 6 months later. At that point, me and my siblings came under the official protection of Canada, and we were granted safe passage out of Chile to be able to rejoin my parents in Canada. This story for me becomes a central creation story to my sense of identity. The public images of the coup, showing people held at gunpoint by the military, being held in the Estadio Nacional. The images of the attack on the Moneda, Chile's presidential office building, and the Moneda on fire, is part of the large public archive of Chile's understanding of itself. But this public archive is also my private one. This image is from film footage shot for a Swedish news outlet showing the Tancaso incident of June 1973, which was an initial failed coup attempt by some members of the military, predating the final coup of September 11th, 1973. That would be a much more formalized effort on the part of Chile's armed forces. I used this footage in an earlier film of mine, What Comes Between, that was released in 2009. Years later, I would discover that the cameraman who shot this footage, Leonardo Henriksen, a dual Argentinian and Swedish national, was shot dead by Chile's military in the process of shooting this footage. And so it becomes footage of Henriksen filming his own death. Learning the story behind this footage that I used in an earlier film made me need to tell his story, and this story in particular, as a kind of appendix to my earlier film, What Comes Between. When I entered into the process of beginning to work on this film, Omar Khadr was on trial in Guantanamo Bay, and it became a very saturating and polarizing story in Canada. And the entire story was so disturbing to me that it just permeated every aspect of my thoughts at the time. This resulted in Khadr's story weaving itself into my film and to become essentially the central glue of it, even though it took me a long time to figure out how to weave all of these disparate elements together into something that was as complex as everything that I was feeling. To me, there has been my life as a Chilean, and there has been my life as a Canadian. My life as a Canadian refugee, or as a refugee here in Canada, has been at once both an amazing experience and a truly terrible one. But at the end of the day, my immediate family, in spite of this terrible fissure in our lives, was provided a pathway in Canada similar to that of the historic settlers. It certainly wasn't as easy, but a pathway existed. And I can tell you that my Canadianness has not ever been questioned in decades. Not since I was a child who could only speak Spanish and was just beginning to learn English. And so on the one hand, to be a victim of a large imperial exercise undertaken by USA jointly with Chile's own oligarchy, and on the other hand, to be the beneficiary of a process that was not exactly the same in Canada, but similar enough. Omar Khadr, who was born in Toronto months after the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded, and this, of course, becomes the connection that ties all of the disparate ideas together and creates the film's title. Omar Khadr will never be considered as Canadian as I am within this society, and would always have process thrown at him as an obstacle to the point of needing to get the Supreme Court of Canada to enforce his rights. In the intersection of all of these disparate stories lies a truth more complex than a straightforward, simple account of my family's journey. The Space Shuttle Challenger as a framing structure to the film came as the very last component in assembling it. If you take away this component, you'll see how little the other elements connect to each other. And this is where the state of my film was for a very long time, which is why it took me so long to make. In a sheer random occurrence, a person I didn't know followed me on Instagram, and their bio said that they were born the same year the Challenger exploded. And this was a really interesting way of identifying yourself. And it made me wonder if it was a way that I could connect everything together. It was just like a moment where everything suddenly clicked for me. And I knew that that was it. So when I did research Omar Khadr, I realized he was born just months after the Challenger disaster. I could remember where I was when I heard the news that Challenger had exploded, similar to people remembering where they were when they found out about 9/11, or when they found out about JFK's assassination, depending on the generation you're from. And in being one of those immediately universally recognizable collective moments of society, it becomes something that almost everybody can immediately situate, certainly much more than the story of the coup d'etat, or that of Leonardo Hendrickson, or even the story of Omar Khadr. The image of the Challenger in flight as the film ends, at the moment of unknown possibility right before its explosion, becomes an analog for a lot. My family, Canada, Chile, the larger world society. Its cycle between large moments of hope and positivity, moments when things can and do work out, followed by disasters that are large scale, world level, and also smaller, private ones. And the final thing that I will add is that the Space Shuttle Challenger is the only film that I've ever made, the only work that I've ever made that people have walked out of in disgust. Audience members have walked out of this film, specifically for the way that I humanize Omar Khadr in it. I have never had people walk out of any other of my films before, not even any of my other documentaries on Chile. And so this film serves as a reminder to me about the privilege that I have in this society to be even allowed to speak about what happened in Chile, because not every large-scale injustice is permitted oxygen in this society. It is easy for me to speak about these things, mostly because there are no negative consequences to me, and quite the contrary, I am given space as an artist to tell these stories. And it must be acknowledged that this privilege is not granted to all. I have seen this clearly, how Omar Khadr has been treated, and this motivated this film into being. And I am seeing this play out again in society right now. So even though I do not come from society's privileged classes, either here in Canada or in Chile, there are still layers of privilege that I benefit from. We're not all equal here, in spite of the collective story that we tell ourselves. And that is the story of the Space Shuttle Challenger. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Cecilia. A lot of things to think about in your presentation, and certainly a lot of questions, but we will leave the questions for the end so we can go through the presentations of all artists. So now we have Rosalina Cerritos, who was born in Mexico City. Her parents are from El Salvador, and she grew up in the Canadian West Coast. Her practice is multidimensional and multisensorial. In her work, she explores and imagines new narratives and new futures through a process and exercise of reconstruction, reconciliation, and reconnection to her memories and to history. So please welcome Rosalina.
Hello. Hi, I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen first. And share. Thing. Are you able to view that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So hello, my name is Rosalina Cerritos, and I'm currently speaking to you from the unceded Coast Salish territories, otherwise known as Vancouver. I would like to thank you for joining me in this conversation regarding my work titled Puentes en la Memoria, which in English translates to Bridges in Memory. First and foremost, I would like to thank the curators, Sara Samash and Tamara Toledo, for inviting me to be a part of this exhibition. I would also like to thank the gallery staff, as well as the technicians that have done such an incredible job with the logistics and installation of the exhibition. I feel very honored and grateful to participate and share in this collective experience that celebrates and gives visibility to Latinx Canadian culture and art. I began developing Puentes en la Memoria in the year 2020 during my second year of my MFA at Emily Carr University of Art and Design. At that time, I was mainly focusing on completing my thesis work, which consisted of 2 multimedia installations. I would like to show you these works just to provide more context in regards to the nature of my artistic practice, direction, and vision. So this is the first of one of my installations. So the title is Somos Xiquilit, We Are Indigo, and it is an interactive multimedia installation. This work explores cultural identity through the history of indigo in El Salvador, and it is a nostalgic celebration exploration of cultural identity through the use of color, texture, and abstract forms. I began developing this work at the end of the spring semester of my first year of graduate studies. My inquiries into cultural identity in the context of El Salvador led me to indigo. The first iteration of this work was installed at Emily Carr University of Art and Design for the MFA interim show. The second iteration was installed during a micro residency that I did at the New Media Gallery, which is located in the city of New Westminster. It was during this residency that I was able to begin exploring digital interactivity and responsive technology. So the images I'm showing you here are of the third iteration, which was part of my thesis. And the following slide, I will show you a short video of the work installed. And now I will show you the second installation that formed part of my MFA thesis. And this work was installed in the Libby Lashgold Gallery at Emily Carr University of Art and Design. It's titled Shuchikisa, which is a Nahuatl word. Nahuatl is one of the indigenous languages spoken in El Salvador. So Chiquisa means to bloom, and again, it is a piece exploring ideas of Salvadoran cultural identity and history, and it is meant to be in conversation with the previous installation, Somos Xiquilit, We Are Indigo. And I will play the video to 30-second video. So in the fall of 2021, right after graduating from Emily Carr, I decided to revisit and to continue developing Puentes en la Memoria. And now, 2 years later, I feel very grateful to be able to exhibit this work for the very first time at Sur Gallery. So in this slide, you can see a virtual exhibition view, and then also an image taken of the work and during opening night. Puentes en la Memoria explores expanded moving image practices that involve experimental digital 3D animation techniques and interactivity design and development. Conceptually, it investigates memory, history, and intergenerational experiences of trauma and hope in the context of El Salvador and its diaspora. It is a work that contains a deep emotionality that is concerned with the complexities of my collective experiences as part of the Salvadoran diaspora. In this case, more specifically with the experiences of my family in regards to our forced migration, beginning with my parents and my brother in 1980 from El Salvador to Mexico, and then in 1989, nearing the end of the Civil War in El Salvador, when my parents were in search of a new refuge and home, which they found in the western coast of Canada. I come from a generation that in El Salvador is known as the children of war. A lot of us in this generation have understood the importance of historical memory and of claiming and telling our stories outside of the official narratives. We feel a deep commitment and responsibility because we too have inherited the pain and the horror of war. But we have also understood that in order to move forward and to heal, we must confront ourselves and the deep pain and trauma caused by this dark chapter of our collective history. My creative process is directly linked to how I have inherited and how I am connected to this history, culture, traumas, and experiences. As a result, my process considers memory, nostalgia, but also celebration as well as hope. This montage of emotions and experiences is what drives my moving image and installations. In my work, I want to discuss the gravity of such devastating and horrifying realities, yet I am also very interested and invested in reconciliation. I think it's important to challenge the homogeneous and violent nature of colonialism and imperialism in the context of my story and all of those stories that are in danger of erasure. As our revolutionary Salvadoran poet Roque Dalton said, no existen los misterios de la historia, existen las falsificaciones de la historia, las mentiras de quienes escriben la historia. There are no mysteries to history, there are only falsifications of history, the lies of those that write the history. Amidst the horrors that are systematically occurring, we need to build strategies, paths, bridges, and ways to resist and then to connect and to hold on immensely and deeply to our humanity. The following slides show a selection of the images I worked with and referenced for Puentes en la Memoria. During the development of this work, I was interested in extracting memories and reintroducing them as abstraction and fragmentation that embodied my own intimate lived experiences. I decided to work with my family archives as well as with images sourced from the internet, more specifically from the Salvadoran War period. The official dates are 1980 to 1992. Using archives as the new methodology in regards to my way of working and processing image. During this process, I left the rationale or logic behind the selection from all of this material to my creative and instinctual intuition. It was a very challenging process to reconcile the images depicting my family's quotidian and happy moments with the images that I found on the internet, which are explicitly saturated and enveloped in horror, despair, and violence. It is through this challenge and struggle that I was making aesthetic and artistic decisions. I used abstraction and fragmentation as a way to carry the narrative and emotion of such a complex experience. Creating this series of moving image works has consisted of using the archival images as texture maps and then later as 3D objects in different digital processes to explore three-dimensional movement and animation. Finally, the monochromatic palette was an attempt to melt and bridge the images together. Finally, for the interactivity design and development, I worked with a fellow colleague and collaborator, Kevin Holliday, who is a screen-based installation artist. They live and work on unceded Coast Salish territories or Vancouver. For around 3 months, we worked out of my studio exploring different ways and techniques of how to incorporate sound through interactivity. During that same period, I documented and recorded intimate conversations with my father and mother at their home, asking them to be gracious with me and share their memories from that very dark period of their lives. And finally, for the purposes of this presentation and to allow the people that have not visited the exhibition or will not be able to, I have prepared a montage of this work.
Bueno, lo que nos pasó en el periodo de 1980 a la que es una década del 1980-1990, en realidad comienza con lo que se llama migración forzada. Entonces, por lo tanto, la migración forzada tiene un origen, la nuestra tiene un origen de violencia política. La violencia política vivida en El Salvador por el desarrollo de lo que ahora los historiadores oficiales llaman el conflicto armado, pero que los integrantes vivos de aquella experiencia, que somos el pueblo, y más que todo el pueblo organizado, llamamos lucha de liberación o lucha revolucionaria.
We used to have moments of fears. That's our home was visited not only once, many times for the militaries at night, and they used to ask us to come out, but it was scared because the only people that they used to bring out of the house, it was Alberto, and me. But I always say to Alberto, we have to bring Oscar. And I always bring Oscar with us. Because I said to Alberto, if they kill us, they will kill Oscar too. Fortunately, and we could leave El Salvador. And at one moment, it was in the 80s, no, that we left El Salvador. From one day to the next, like we went to bed today, and the next morning we have to leave the country. Like non-gratum persons in your own country. And we arrived to Mexico, we live happy moments in Mexico, like my husband explained. We were welcoming for the Mexican people, that they give us solidarity, love, and peace at that moment.
Thank you. Stop sharing.
Thank you, Rosalina. Was that it? Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your powerful work. And thank you for also giving us a little bit more context with previous works that led to what you're exhibiting at Sur Gallery. So now our final guest artist, Soledad Fatima Munoz. Soledad is an interdisciplinary artist, cultural worker, and researcher born in Canada and raised in Chile. Munoz studied film at Universidad Arcis in Santiago, Chile. She has a diploma in textile arts from Capilano University in North Vancouver, Canada, a BFA from Emily Carr University of Arts and Design, and an MFA from the Department of Fiber and Material Studies of the School of Art Institute, of the Art Institute of Chicago. So please welcome Soledad Fatima Munoz.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to the previous presentations. Those were amazing, very hard to follow. I'm gonna just share my screen. Mm. Can you see it there?
I think you unshared.
Is that better? Can you see it? Sorry. Okay, I'm just gonna have to share this screen. Sorry, I don't know why it's.
That's working.
Okay. Yeah, it's just when I go into slideshow, it seems to just be stuck. Sorry about that. What about that? Can you see it?
Yes, it's working now.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so my name is Soledad Munoz. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the piece that is at the show. Thank you so much, Sara, for including me. Well, Desaparecidas is also a really good meeting point in my practice, because it kind of started a whole new, I don't think if new, but just a path in which I am right now. Yeah, so first of all, I started as a sound artist. Well, I went to film school and I was in a lot of bands and stuff like that in Chile. So sound was my medium, and I understood sound as a material. And so for a really long time, I was trying to get all these sounds out of material. I was really interested in the materiality of sound and how different materials sound at the end of the day. And very in a kind of aesthetic way. But that then gave me the tools to be able to do what I do now. And then as a weaver, I was always interested in copper because I am Chilean and copper is a very prevalent material, and it's always around, but also because of its connection to the land and therefore extractivism. So in a way, I could say so much more through material, just by using copper. Excuse me. And so yeah, from 2011 to 2014, I made a lot of copper weavings, which is still I continue to do. That's another one. Just yeah, again, the connections between copper, materiality, and extractivism is something that I have just understood and stuck with me and throughout my practice. And then the imagery of the disappeared. This is also from 2013. It was the first time I wove the disappeared, and then made it into a book. And just for I guess for the first time this is 2011, that's when I made that piece. Just being able to be far away from Chile to then look at this, and that was kind of what the woven structure gave me, that if you are close to the structure, you can't really see it. And that's what was happening to me in Chile. But then when you go outside of your certain geographies, you start to understand how your oppression is just it's just a little there's things bigger at work that made that happen. And so these are the series that Desaparecidas is from. Same thing, just kind of combining the two previous paths into these sonic weavings that either amplify vibrations in the room, or if you see the three of them have like a cupola that serves as a coil, and they pick up electromagnetic fields. And then here is Desaparecidas. When it comes to the background of this piece, why it's not specifically the Chilean disappeared, because I don't feel comfortable putting the disappeared in galleries without a context. And so this, more than being specifically about people, it was about the archetype of the disappeared. And I feel like we've seen even now that once we see a number of people like that, it just represents so many of our oppressions, because it doesn't point towards the oppressed, but the oppressor. Because usually when we see this huge number of people in a textile, in a photograph, and so on, it points to the perpetrator, which usually for that number of people to exist, that are either disappeared, missing, or killed, and so on, there has to be a state-sponsored violence. So more so pointing out and also using copper as just using that historical materiality to signify extractivism. And so that was the first piece I ever met, like Desaparecides, the one that's at the gallery right now, was the first piece that I did at my while I was in Chicago doing my master's. And my final piece is Detenido Desaparecido, which is based on the Chilean disappeared detainees. And the reason why I installed them in Chicago was because I realized that if in Chile you say the Chicago boys, who were students that went to the University of Chicago and then installed the ideology of neoliberalism via coup and through the dictatorship of Pinochet. If you say the Chicago boys in Chile, everyone recognizes them, but then once you're in Chicago, you say the Chicago boys and literally no one knows them. And so I just felt the responsibility of teaching the oppressor, I guess. And it was also kind of a cathartic way of, for me, to be like, you started this all and you don't even know it. And so I'm just going to put every single disappeared in the middle of the city, because the gallery was the 0 of Chicago, 0 north and 0 west. So in the Sullivan building, it's called. And this is what it sounds like. Let me know if you can hear it. Okay, and yeah, so some of the portraits are like the one in the gallery, just flat, just one single weave, and they pick up vibrations. And then the other bigger ones are a double weave, and they do the coil antenna, which picks up AM and FM radio which is just the hum, because we didn't get to catch much of it because the building is an old cement building, and so that's what we caught. And then electromagnetic fields as well. So in a way, they're just filtering their environment and transforming them into a soundscape. And then the project I'm working on now, it's a 3-year-long project called Woven Memory. Thanks to the Canada Arts Council, I have on a composite. So it's a project that's going on for the 3 years of the duration of the grant. So it's these large scale copper wire weavings. And I work with people in specific sites of memory or important geographical spots for the dictatorship of Pinochet. And those are the 2 that I installed last year. This one is from the Veleidosa mine, and this one was for La Providencia, which is a site of memory in Antofagasta. And it is of La Caravana de la Muerte, which was, or the death caravan, which went through in the first days of the dictatorship. General Arellano Stark went through different cities, killing important leaders and union members. So this was the installation of the one in La Veleidosa. You can see there in these tires, that's where the mine is, and this map is showing how the distance of like in 100 meters, a hand was found of certain person. Up until now, they had found the remains of 4 people in the mine, and all of our energy for this site was focused on getting it onto the search plan, plan de búsqueda, because it's the 50th anniversary since the coup, and so they've been doing and using the map to to reopen the mine and hopefully find more remains, because with the research that we did, we heard that at least 13 people were seen the first time that people went down to the mine, and then it was dynamited after that. And after that, in 1991, they were only able to find the remains of 4 people. And then this is from La Providencia. It's a site of memory that used to be a detention center, a clandestine detention center and torture center. And that's where we put the death caravan weaving. It is a 25-meter long weaving, and it stops because that side that we're looking at is the site of memory. But if you look the other way, there's still a police station, or where police officers are being trained. And so it kind of stops right there. And then I'm preparing to leave tomorrow or the day after tomorrow to go install the same sound piece that I did in Chicago, but at Londres 38, which is a site of memory in downtown Santiago. And we're depicting the 98 people that went through the site of memory and are still detenidos desaparecidos, disappeared detainees. And yeah, thank you so much.